We are live from Boston. How's everybody doing? What a match. Federer slays Kyrgios, folks. I want to break this down. I have to let the live stream get calibrated first. I want some folks to join us. This was a fantastic match to watch for the Fed fans, without question. Where are you, Fed fans? Come hither. So much to talk about. I want to give you the key to this match, the key to why Roger Federer was able to slay the mighty Australian, the man who doesn't have a coach, and sparked a bunch of controversy the other day because the umpire in Kyrgios' match against Herbert chose to step down off the chair and give Kyrgios some well-needed coaching. Well, again, Kyrgios does not choose to have a coach at all. He's coachless. And in a couple of instances during this match against Federer today, I think it became eminently clear that Kyrgios perhaps needs a bit of coaching. Kyrgios is very stiff at the net. He doesn't bend his knees. He doesn't bring his body down to make the volleys, which is a pretty basic rule of tennis. You need to bring your body down at the net when you're volleying, and Kyrgios refuses to do that. So it makes sense that Nick Kyrgios doesn't have a coach, because I'm not sure there's a person in the world that could tolerate coaching Nick Kyrgios. At least the way it stands, he seems to know everything. Well, Roger Federer had something to say about that today. How are you doing, Ben? Nice to see you, Sami. I hope we have some Fed fans out there. I hope we have some Nadal fans out there. I want to break down this excellent match and give you the key to why Federer is certainly on track to that quarterfinal against the elastic hyena Novak Djokovic. Federer looked a lot better. It was certainly his best match of the tournament. He rose to the occasion, and Kyrgios was playing fairly well today. This was not a thrown match by Kyrgios. Kyrgios went on a trip to the Olive Garden in the second set, but he didn't want to. He didn't simply just let that happen. He was fighting. We have Stews, who's come on and made a proposition. I think it's a legitimate one. And he says, according to the calculus we were talking about the other day, in every match, part of the outcome relates back to what the winning player did right. And part of the outcome relates back to what the loser did wrong. And Stews is saying that Federer didn't play that well. Kyrgios was absolutely bad. Well, certainly we couldn't say that about the first set. No, sir. Let's back up a little bit. They did a bit of a pre-match interview as the players were walking onto the court, and Kyrgios came out and did his little interview and seemed very confident, very calm. I'm impressed by the young Kyrgios's composure. He was ready for action. Well, Roger stepped up to the mic for his little pre-match interview, and Roger was almost trembling, folks. The great Federer was clearly a bit nervous prior to this match. And let me tell you, those nerves displayed themselves in the first set, which was very close. It was a very close affair. And for those of you who believe Kyrgios wasn't playing well, I urge you to go look at the first set numbers for Kyrgios. Kyrgios was doing just fine in this set. And in fact, he created 4 break points against the great Federer's serve. Well, Federer gave us an indication of what was to come by saving every single one of those break points. In that game, the 7th game of the first set with Federer serving, it was quite a long affair in that game. I think it approached 10 minutes. There were 6 deuces, 4 break points, but Federer kept his nose ahead, folks, and that was very impressive in that game, although it did suggest that Kyrgios, based on the way the play had looked up until that point, it suggested that Kyrgios would apply more pressure to the Federer serve in this particular match than Federer could or would to the Kyrgios serve. Well, Federer just stole this set right away at 4-5 with Kyrgios serving. Federer converted his 6th break point of the match at that point and went on to serve for the set. Excuse me, he just picked up the set 6-4 at that point by breaking Kyrgios. Well, Kyrgios did slip a little bit. There's no question about that. We can't deny that that happened. But each match, again, relates back to what the losing player did wrong and simultaneously to what the winning player did right. And what the first set suggests is that what Federer was doing right was protecting serve ruthlessly and effectively. And he converted at just the right moment to steal this little set and put it in his back pocket. Well, once Federer is up a set, things change a bit, don't they? In the first set, serve win percentage was real good, but you know what? His second serve percentage was not very good at all. His return numbers were not great. But again, with the advantage of that first set, which Federer stole, and stole is the proper verb to use. That set was stolen from the Australian, and he went over to his seat, Nick Kyrgios, and was muttering something about first serves, first serves. Of course, Kyrgios's first serves fell off dramatically toward the end of the set. Federer's game was not perfect in that set, and in fact, I would say he was doing a lot of pushing. Now, those of you who like Djokovic and who like to defend Djokovic didn't like what I said about him the other day in connection with the match in Cincinnati, the final in Cincinnati, where the elastic hyena overcame the pussycat, Roger Federer. On a better day, he's a tiger or a cheetah, but on this day, he was a mere pussycat, wasn't he? Well, Djokovic was doing some pushing. And those of you who are upset that I would suggest that Djokovic pushes, and the true articulation of that was that Djokovic was both pushing and going deep, often into the corners. There were some nuances to the push approach, but the long and short of it is that Roger Federer did not require the elastic hyena to do anything more than push in that match. Djokovic is capable of doing a lot more. Well, potentially because of nerves. And believe me, based on that pre-match interview, folks, and based on Federer's play in this first set, he was nervous. Nick Kyrgios makes Federer nervous, gives him butterflies. That's the truth. And that is how this match began. Well, again, Federer stole the first set, but going into the second set, it was unclear what would happen. And by all appearances at that point, this could have been a 4 or 5 setter easily. Of course, we were all expecting tie breaks here, and Federer manages to escape this one without a single tie break, and he escorts the mighty Australian to the Olive Garden in the second set. He really turned it on in this second set and went up 2 breaks almost before anyone could realize what happened. He was executing some very effective drop shots. I'm talking about Federer here. Very effective drop shots, making Kyrgios come to the net on Federer's terms. And since Kyrgios refuses to be coached, except possibly by intermeddling umpires, Kyrgios was not positioning himself right for these volleys. or half volleys. In fact, it was just, they weren't volleys at all often. They were responses to very effective drop shots by Federer. Well, Federer was playing the net masterfully today, folks. Very masterful at the net without question. And for those of you who watched this match, you know that. Well, Federer had a different point of view coming into this second set with a set under his belt already. Well, those drop shots were the key to this second set, I believe. Bringing Kyrgios to the net on Federer's terms. That's what won the match, folks. Or at least that's what produced the little trip to the Olive Garden for a breadstick in the second set. There was a great game in the seventh game of the second set on Kyrgios' serve that went for a while and produced some amazing tennis, including an astounding around the net post shot from Federer that will be in every highlight reel tonight on the sports news, without question, and on the regular news too. That's the money shot. He said after the match that he didn't know he was going to hit it. He didn't think about it until the last moment. Well, the key to exercising that shot, the around the net post, for Roger Federer, nets are not a big thing. He's capable of rendering the net irrelevant. In a tennis match, most people have to hit their shots over the net. Roger Federer, the magician, doesn't need to do business with that net, does he? Well, he went around the post on this one, and it was a real doozy. One of his finest. He's done this a number of times in his career, and he is just masterful at these around the net post shots. But the key is to wait. The key is to wait until the ball is just about to hit the ground. And watch the replay of this. Roger's coming around on the right side of the net, and he just waits until the last moment. The ball is probably a millimeter from hitting the court. And Roger pummels it. It was a pretty flat shot, actually, but it was so beautifully executed. I don't think the shot itself went more than 1 or 2 feet off the ground. Again, the net was of no moment for the great Federer on that particular shot. Well, that was inspiring. That was a fine shot. For those of you who think Federer was not playing well today and that the outcome of this match is mostly to do with Kyrgios's bad decisions and lackluster play, well, go back to that around the net. I don't think you can really argue. I think Federer won this match to a significant degree. I think this outcome is much more related to Federer's good decisions and excellent and brilliant tennis than it is about what Kyrgios did wrong. But we can have an argument about that. Patrick, I did do the live stream last night. We talked about the very entertaining and telling Nadal versus Khachanov match. And when I went back to watch the actual footage when it gets posted on YouTube after I'm done, there were some technical problems, so I took it down. It was a little rough. The audio was fine. So for those of you kind of treating this like a podcast and really don't care about my big, ugly mug, well, it probably would have been just fine for you, and maybe I'll put it back up. But let me say that Federer did look devastating, just on form in this second set. His serve numbers were a lot better. He was suffering on a second serve win percentage in the first set, but his serve numbers were tremendous in the second. He hit 16 winners in the set, merely 3 unforced errors coming off the maestro's racket in the second set, in which, again, the mighty Kyrgios gets taken to the Olive Garden for a breadstick. I don't think, did he have a bread? Well, I think he did let a set go recently. It was a bagel set. Sometimes he throws sets. But again, Nick didn't throw anything here, folks. Nothing. He was dedicated to this match the whole time. fully dedicated to this match the whole time. Well, now Federer's up 2-0 against Kyrgios. Kyrgios is just moaning in pain, figuratively. He's on the ropes, to use a better metaphor, to be sure. Federer up 2-0. Kyrgios kind of crumbling, kind of buckling here. And then I tweeted out, for those of you who pay attention to my tweets, and for those of you who don't, please follow the channel on Twitter. I said, here comes the Raj, but will he let Kyrgios pull an Anderson? That was, of course, a similar situation that Federer had with Anderson in the quarterfinal of Wimbledon this year. It was a little different because coming into that third set, Roger just barely escaped the second in a tiebreak, whereas Roger won this set very decisively against Kyrgios. So, but there was a question, particularly when you think about this in light of the match against Nishioka, where Fed really led up at the end. Well, here it was a different narrative, and I think it's a preferable narrative for Roger. Start a little nervy, find his legs, feel out the opponent, feel out the court, and then turn it on at the right moment. Play the clutch tennis, protect the serve. And remember, there was that really long game in the first set. That was really the turning point of the match when Roger fended off 4 break points, 6 deuces. That was something of a nail biter, but Roger escaped, and nothing even close to that happened in terms of Kyrgios getting a piece of Roger's serve for the rest of the match. Let's talk about the third set. Again, Roger was feeling confident. Kyrgios was playing just fine. I thought he didn't let up. He was still committed to this match. Sometimes Kyrgios lets up. And that's why the umpire in the match against Pierre-Hugues Herbert, I was going to say Humbert, which was another match earlier in the week, but it's Herbert. That's why the umpire came down, because Nick was so out of sorts, being such a brat, so out of the match, so absent from the tennis court, that he needed a good talking to, a swift kick in the arse. That's all the umpire was trying to do. Now they've ousted him out, the umpire, I mean, to the doubles courts and to juniors matches. Well, the guy's a good umpire, and he was doing the right thing. But sometimes the nice guy wins last. Sometimes good intentions lead to unforeseeable consequences, and he has had to deal with quite a backlash, even though he wasn't teaching or coaching Nick Kyrgios. Remember, Nick Kyrgios is uncoachable, and that's what Nick Kyrgios said after the match. So there wasn't much coaching going on. But listen, the umpire is in charge of these matches, and he needs to make sure that there's a certain decorum on the court. And Nick Kyrgios was going out of bounds, folks. He needed a talking to. Who else was going to do it? Not Nick Kyrgios' coach, because Nick Kyrgios' coach doesn't exist. Roger Federer doesn't really need a net to win points. He doesn't need to get shots over the net to win points. Well, Nick Kyrgios apparently doesn't need a coach to win matches. Well, a coach might have put him in better stead today because he needed some coaching. Unfortunately for Kyrgios, the umpire didn't offer a few tips to the Australian. But in the third set, there was a great game, 7th game. And there were some very great points. Listen, if I was wrong about that net getting around the net post, was that the second set or the third set? Now I'm reading my notes, and it's suggesting that actually that was in the third set. I think it was in the second set. It's all kind of a blur to me now. Let me know. My notes are a little scratchy here. This was an exciting match to watch. But in the third set, he was 8-10 at the net. He hit 20 winners. And he was solid. He broke at 5-5 to go up 6-5, and then he served at love, ending it with an ace to take the match and land a spot in the round of 16, where Federer will face John Millman. Well, what do you think Federer can do with this Millman guy? He came through Kukushkin in a match that was a smorgasbord of unforced errors. Kukushkin was just spraying stuff all over the tough match. But Millman is showing up in some of the aggregate numbers for this tournament, particularly with respect to his return prowess, his return game. Federer has faced Millman once before in Brisbane in 2015, and Raj dropped the first set to Millman. He did come through that. I think the smart money, of course, is on Federer here to land a spot in the quarterfinal and face the hyena, Novak Djokovic, who had a real scrappy match the other day with Tennis Sandgren, but ultimately sent Sandgren packing like a fat boy in a dodgeball game. Djokovic needed to lose the third set. Sandgren's serving numbers rose substantially in that set. Djokovic needed to lose that set to kick him into Djokovic gear, to kick him into God mode. Patrick, yes, Kukushkin hit 74 unforced errors. Maybe it was in the third, the around the net post. Sorry. I had my notes here. It must have been in the third set, and that was that great seventh game of the third set. But listen, you guys get the point here. Kyrgios actually plowed through that game, notwithstanding that very brilliant shot from Federer. Again, Roger Federer is a magician, folks. He does not need or does not find himself hampered by a net in a tennis match. He need not hit balls over the net. He has that privilege. He can do that. It was a sight to behold today with Federer, folks. And I think he's certainly the favorite coming in to the Millman match, without question. But with respect to the keys to this match, and I've promised you in previous episodes that I would get to a nugget within the first 15 minutes of these shows, these live streams. Well, I'm a little late on this, but I've touched upon a few nuggets. One thing is that at 15:30, that critical point on serve where Kyrgios would have the opportunity to go up and convert that to a double break point, Federer was saving those. He was saving break points and, again, protecting his serve ruthlessly, serving quite well. In addition, yes, Yehuda, I'll talk about Nadal, Khachanov. I talked about it last night. In fact, I did a full hour on Nadal versus Khachanov. But I'll do it again today, and I planned on doing that since I know a lot of you are not able to catch the live stream. For those of you just joining us, greetings. Thank you for joining us in this very high-level tennis IQ set of comments that we have in the margin. And thanks for watching. Yesterday, I posted a live commentary. It was kind of late at night. It was a busy day. But there were some technical difficulties that prevented me from actually keeping it up on YouTube. So the only people who got to watch that were the people that joined us live, which were quite a few people, and a couple of people that caught it afterwards. But I did do a full analysis of Nadal versus Khachanov, and let's talk about that a bit right now. Well, this was kind of a Djokovic match in a way. This was a scrappy match between Nadal versus Khachanov, right? Not so smooth for Nadal. I've said before that Nadal's draw looked as smooth as a baby's bottom. Well, Khachanov, the mighty Russian with a booming serve and very dependable and precise ground strokes off both wings, roughened this draw up a bit for Rafael Nadal. Not so smooth. This is a rougher, a sandpaper baby's bottom. It was a rough time for Rafa, and where was the delivery man? Where was the delivery man? I was saying that Roger was very good at fighting off potential break points at 15-30 on serve in today's match against Kyrgios. Well, the other side of that coin is whether returners can convert those into double break points, and Nadal is usually very good with that. But in this match, and this is the nugget on Nadal versus Khachanov, every time Nadal was able to produce a 15-30 score on Khachanov's serve, at least until the last set where he was able to do it once. But in all the previous times, I think there was 8 times that happened, Nadal could not convert it into a double break point. And that was the key to the match. Listen, coming into this match, and I'll get back to Federer for you folks who want to talk about this Federer match. I could talk all night about this Federer match. I'm excited. He's going to take the elastic hyena to task, folks. It's going to happen. Whether the hyena is able to escape or not is yet to be seen, but Federer is ready for the Serbinator. But coming into the Nadal match, Khachanov was the leading scorer of the tournament in terms of his first serve winning percentage, which was about 90%. Again, in all his matches, his 2 matches coming in to the match with Nadal. The conditions were different, in fact, dramatically different for Nadal. It cooled down substantially. This resulted in some lower bounces, and this did not favor Nadal. There was also a potential issue with Nadal's right knee. He had a preparation on his right knee, and there was a clip from the locker room that showed Nadal screwing around with his knee, jumping on it. There was clearly some kind of weakness or some issue going on in his knee area. Well, there was an abundant amount of breaking in this, in terms of breaks of serve in this match. Not as much as the Millman versus Kukushkin today. I think there was just a record number of breaks on both players' serves in that match today. I'm going to have to go back and watch that because I want to learn more about Millman. I've seen a few of his matches in the tournament, but I want to learn a little bit more. We'll have something to say about him in a minute. Khachanov was hitting a lot more winners in this match. He hit 66 winners to Nadal's 49, I believe, but Nadal was committing a lot fewer unforced errors. But again, the key to why Khachanov was able to push the great Nadal to 4 sets and then push Nadal to 2 tiebreakers. Final score of this was 5-7, 7-5, 7-6, 7-6. This was a close match. This was a sandpaper's baby bottom, or a sandpaper baby bottom if one exists. Sorry, maybe that imagery is not so appealing, but the key was that Khachanov was saving those points at 15-30 on serve. And the second key, and this problematizes my view of Nadal. Well, it doesn't really problematize it because the whole point about this match is that Nadal, the delivery man, was not really on the court, was sort of absent, was not in the building. He wasn't delivering in the way that we're used to seeing Nadal deliver, was he? Something happened. He pushed through. He has the win. But this was a street fight, folks. This looked like a Djokovic match. Each player emerges from this a bit battered, a bit worse for the wear. Nadal has the win, of course, but this was a tough match. Nadal took a lot of heat from the Russian, and Khachanov has a lot of promise, without question. I like him. Seems like a cool guy. But Nadal stayed positive. That was the brilliant thing about Nadal versus Khachanov, and a factor that distinguishes Nadal from Federer, if you ask me. Federer has a hard time staying positive when the circumstances become adverse to him, when he drops a set, for example. But you know what? At the end of that first set in the Nadal match, and Khachanov took it 7-5, Nadal was just full of positive energy. Full of positive energy. But what Khachanov, to go back to this previous point, he was not only saving those points at 15-30, but he was consolidating his breaks. Now, I've said before that one of the factors that makes Rafa Nadal one of the greatest tennis players of all time is that he does not let opponents consolidate. He's the anti-consolidator, the anti-consolidationist. He will not let you consolidate. Break him. If you break the excitable bull, he'll come storming back, won't he? Well, that's what happens in ordinary circumstances. But Nadal could not get a big enough piece of Khachanov's tremendous serve and astounding backup in terms of the ground strokes coming in behind those serves. A number of 1-2 punches, some great net play from Khachanov. But listen, he was giving the great Nadal a serious run for his money. But Nadal stayed positive the whole time. Djokovic doesn't really stay positive. He gets negative. And he converts the negative energy somehow into positive energy. That's what I was calling the Djokovic paradox the other day. He converts the negative energy into positive energy, but Nadal just keeps the positive energy flowing. And this is pure, unadulterated energy. When Einstein wrote the equation E equals mc squared, you might as well have said Nadal equals mc squared. Nadal, this is pure energy from him and pure positive energy. He stayed positive. He was committed to the match. He knew he could win the match. Well, he received a few gifts from Khachanov in the third set tiebreaker in the form of 3 double faults from Khachanov, which were the only double faults that Khachanov served in the entire set. They all came in the tiebreaker, which helped Rafa Nadal without question. But Nadal held his head high. He was also spraying a few forehands around, which was a little uncharacteristic. As I was saying last night, garden hoses are good for growing your lilies, but garden hoses are not going to work on the tennis court, folks. You need to have more control in your forehands. Well, those were just hiccups for Nadal, of course, but they were uncharacteristic. They were a little strange. I don't think they were red flags. They were just a little strange. They were little blips. So Nadal stands strong, notwithstanding the fact that he could not convert at 15-30 on Khachanov's serve. And that says something about the great Nadal's return game. It just wasn't quite up to the level that we're used to. This could have been a cleaner match. This could have been a cleaner match. He might just have supported my proposition that his draw was as smooth as a baby's bottom. He might have supported that in this match. This could have been a pretty smooth affair. But Nadal wasn't quite firing on all cylinders, folks. He wasn't quite there, and he just escapes this one. That's the best term to use. He escaped it. Ultimately, he was, by an edge, the better player on the court, and ultimately, in certain key moments, like the third set breaker, Khachanov buckled. His inexperience hurt him a bit, I think. And Nadal, of course, is very battle tested, and he stayed positive throughout the match and converted that positive energy into a win, notwithstanding some very problematic play from Nadal in this match. It's not a pretty process. I don't think this is indicative of some kind of permanent problem for Nadal in this tournament. No, sir. I think he charged through. He played some clutch tennis. He didn't convert at 15-30. He let Khachanov consolidate too many times. Now, the breakbacks came, but usually they come back right in the next game, right? He couldn't quite muster those. So there was something off with Nadal. Much credit to Khachanov in that match for the great play in that match. And he had a good run at the U.S. Open. I think we're going to see a lot more from him. I have a couple of viewers who have been mentioning Khachanov for a while, and I'm glad that I was able to get a closer look at Khachanov, and I think he was in pretty much the best form he can muster and produce in a tournament like this. So that was a real sight to behold. Nadal, of course, has respect for Khachanov after this match. Khachanov was not able to take a single set off Nadal in their previous meetings, which had been, I think, 4 previous meetings. And that included a best of 5. So this was an accomplishment for Khachanov, and all the things he did in this match, contrary to the Nadal return game, such as saving those 15-30 points on serve, which happened a lot, and consolidating his breaks. Those factors, I think, give me confidence that he's got a lot of promise, and we're going to be seeing more from him. He's got a great serve and devastating ground strokes, a fantastic ground game. And he moves well around the court for such a big guy. He's 6'6". I think he made an impression on Nadal. It wasn't a W, the impression, but it was an impression. He was able to make an impression on Nadal, and we're going to be seeing a lot more of him, and I can't wait, to be frank, to see more of Karen Khachanov. So next for Nadal will be Basilashvili, the Georgian. They've played once at the French Open, and it was a bloodbath for the poor Georgian on that particular day at the 2017 French Open. Final score, 6-love, 6-1, 6-love. All bagels and breadsticks there. Can Basilashvili redeem and at least play a respectable match against Nadal? Well, it's more likely. Of course, Roland Garros is a place where virtually no tennis player wants to face Rafael Nadal. No tennis player who wants to win wants to actually have to face Rafael Nadal at the French Open. But that was, blood in the streets in that match. So it looks like Nadal's draw is back to the smooth as a baby's bottom metaphor. But there'll be problems after Basilashvili, potentially. I've looked up some of the aggregate numbers from this tournament, and I wanted to share them with you. And this bears on Nadal's potential quarterfinal coming up, which will be against either Thiem or Anderson. Teams playing Anderson in the round of 16. Dominic Thiem, I talked about that match in yesterday's live broadcast as well. He looked very strong against Taylor Fritz. His numbers were very strong. He did drop a set to the American. He did record quite a few unforced errors, but that part of Thiem's game. He started off that match in kind of the wrong mindset, or certainly adopting a problematic approach, which was to kind of rush up in on the Fritz serve, kind of hugging the baseline and coming in on the baseline, in fact, where he needed more room. The footwork wasn't backing up. That kind of attacking play for him. So he fixed that little problem. And Thiem finished very strong in this match against Fritz. But Nadal will either have to deal with Anderson, which will be a rematch from last year's final, or Thiem, who has never gone deeper than the round of 16 at the U.S. Open. Well, based on the head-to-head against Thiem and Anderson, it does look like Anderson will probably be able to squeeze through. Anderson, of course, came through our boy Shapovalov, who looked very strong. That was a close 5-set match where Shapo was hurt by a couple of wrong calls, basically overrules, which means that the points are played again. But that happened at a point when Shapo was about to break Anderson, essentially. So Anderson came through, but Shapo looked really good in this tournament. That was kind of a disappointment. For those Shapo fans among you, it was a bit disappointing. Anderson is not a big favorite. He doesn't have a big fan base. We were talking about the Twitter followers for these players, and I noted the other day that Nadal actually has the most Twitter followers of any of the top tennis players. But I doubt Kevin Anderson's Twitter following is very impressive at all. And the only time Thiem has been able to beat Anderson, they've met 7 times. Anderson has won 6 of those. And in one instance at Madrid, I think it was just this year, Thiem was able to beat Anderson. But Thiem is a specialist on clay in a way. The courts at the U.S. Open are starting to play a little faster. The bounces are coming in a little lower. But it didn't hurt Thiem much in the match against Fritz. Whether it hurt Nadal in the Khachanov match, I'm not sure. It could have been a knee issue as well with Nadal. Those two factors were certainly at play, I think, contributing to the dip, I think, the small dip in Nadal's play, notwithstanding the fact, again, that he did deliver ultimately. But my nugget on the Nadal match, for those of you tuning in, is a query. Where was the delivery man? The delivery man was not in the building. Nadal was just not delivering in this match. His conversion rate was not very respectable. Well, it was respectable, but wasn't as good as Khachanov's. And of course, at those 15, 30 points, as we talked about before. Well, Nadal could have a real match on his hands in the form of Anderson, possibly in the form of a match against Thiem. But let's talk about some of the aggregate numbers from the tournament. Now that we have 3 matches in the bag for a lot of the players, and we've got some pending matches now, and I will try to kind of stay apprised of this. Alexander Zverev has taken the first set in a tiebreaker from Philippe Kohlschreiber. The little engine that could, Diego Schwartzman, is now up a break against Nishikori, and Nishikori's name is going to come up in a second. Luca Pouille seems to be doing a job on the grunter Sosa. But back to these aggregate numbers for the tournament, which sort of suggest how well the players are playing generally in the tournament, because it aggregates the numbers from all of their matches. So let's look at a few metrics to see who's leading in these important stats. Well, on the first serve win percentage, after 3 matches from some of the players, Raonic leads with 88% first serve win percentage for the entirety of the tournament. Isner is in there, Delpo is in there, and Dominique Thiem is in there with 82%. So Thiem looks solid. Of course, Raonic looks very solid and is serving some of the fastest serves in the tournament. He and Isner certainly. So that's one metric that would probably be a better indicator at a tournament like Wimbledon, to be honest, because the serve means so much. Well, what about the second serve win percentage? Well, after 3 matches for a few of the players, we can talk about a couple of the ones that have only played 2. And actually, there are not many players left who played 2. There's a couple of pending matches. But for those who've played 3 matches, and that produces more numbers to crunch here, guess who has the greatest second serve win percentage of all the players in the tournament? John Millman. 63% on the second serve, which is a very redoubtable number, folks. Well, Federer has a little Millman problem coming at him, doesn't he? We'll have to see what Millman can do with the great Federer's serve, and we'll have to see if Millman can sustain that kind of second serve win percentage against Federer, who was looking very effective, cat-like in his return game. Of course, Federer thrives on confidence. That's why winning the first set is good for him. Listen, the Anderson match at Wimbledon was a hiccup. It was a total hiccup. Usually, under normal circumstances, folks, when you're 2 sets down against Roger Federer, you're going to lose. Federer thrives on the confidence, and today it basically settled his nerves. When he stole that first set from Kyrgios, and he did it masterfully, folks, right at the last minute, that calmed his nerves, and he was a new player coming out for the second set. But as I said before, Kyrgios makes Federer nervous, very nervous. If you can find some footage of that pre-match interview, and oftentimes those don't get published on YouTube, but the pre-match interview with Federer, you could tell he was shaky. Nick Kyrgios makes him nervous, folks, because he knows that the breakers are usually going to be forthcoming. He knows it can be a tight match, and he knows he can lose. Other people that have very top drawer statistics on the second serve win percentage after 3 matches at the U.S. Open this year include Raonic, Isner. After 2 matches, Nishikori had a very impressive percentage. We're going to have to figure in his match percentages from today against Schwartzman. And again, the little engine that could, Diego, is now up a break in the first, but they're at deuce. Nishikori's going to get a piece of the Schwartzman serve at some point. So the first set is not a foregone conclusion in favor of Schwartzman, by no means. Nishikori's looking very good. Well, his second serve win percentage after his 2 matches coming into this match against Schwartzman was top-notch, as was Alexander Zverev's. What about on the return game in the aggregate statistics? Well, in terms of the break points won, the number of break points won after 3 matches, guess who leads? John Millman. He's won 25 break points over the course of this tournament. So let me repeat. John Millman has a second serve win percentage that is the top percentage of all the players in the tournament, and he is winning more break points than anybody in the tournament so far. Cilic is also up there with the break points. Delpo, Team is a name that comes up again. Basilashvili, who is going to be Nadal's little problem tomorrow, has a pretty impressive number of break points won. Djokovic, for those of you who are interested, has 13 break points that he's won in the tournament so far. Again, compared to Millman's 25 break points. Federer has a returner on his hands, folks, and a person that can back up his second serves very well. Again, 63% for the tournament by John Millman on the second serve wins. Finally, another metric relating to the return game. Break points converted. Here, Cilic tops the list. 65% for Cilic on the break points converted. You've also got Alexander Zverev, who's delivering some good numbers on the conversion rate, as well as Coric, who's about 57%. So those are some interesting numbers. Millman cannot be taken for granted by Roger Federer. It was a splendid performance today by Roger Federer, for those of you joining us. And for those of you joining us, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. And if you subscribe, remember to hit the bell icon so that you can get notifications of the Tennis Talk Daily live streams, which are coming in every day during the US Open. And this tournament is getting exciting. So it's going to get good, folks. We're looking at this thing from every angle, this evolving organism that we call the US Open. We're looking at it from every single angle. Of course, we're going to focus in on the stars, the greats. We have three, arguably the three greatest. Rod Laver is going to roll over a little bit, but we have arguably the three greatest tennis players in tennis history playing right now in the same tournament. And all of them are playing pretty well. Djokovic is going to be a street fighter. He's just street fighting, folks. It's all brass knuckles and jackknives and Molotov cocktails in a Djokovic match. It's not high technology stuff. But you know what? He emerges a bit battered from these matches as well. That's why I call it a street fight, because both players end up a bit bloody at the end of a Djokovic match, at least under ordinary circumstances. And the Tennis Sandgren match was no real exception. But Federer looked good, and it was an improvement, to be sure, from his previous matches. Now, he's on an upward trajectory, folks. Fed fans, giving you a shout out here, my friends. Fed fans, your man is on an upward trajectory. He started strong and ended a little shaky against the Japanese youngster, Nishioka. He improved against Benoit Paire, the bearded Frenchman, the bearded one who loves to smash rackets and who brings a very interesting personality to the court, in a way similar to Nick Kyrgios, to be quite honest. Benoit was making a lot of errors in that match and hit an ungodly amount of double faults, which were gifts, to be sure, to Roger Federer. But Federer laid down some numbers in that match, particularly in his breakpoint conversion rate, some of which has to do with Paire's errors, of course. But he laid down some conversion numbers that suggested to me that Federer was on an upward trajectory in that match. Well, now today we have confirmation that the great Federer is ascending. He's taking flight, folks. He's taking flight, and Djokovic is on the horizon. He can taste the elastic hyena. Maybe that was the wrong metaphor to use in terms of taste. He can feel the elastic hyena coming at him. He can, and he knows just what to do. I think if Federer can protect his serve in the same manner that he did today, I think if he can get some confidence by taking the first set, again, the adversity for Federer is a problematic occurrence. Sometimes it works, sometimes it pumps him up, but oftentimes it gets him down a little bit. He loses a bit of commitment to the match. He gets a little upset, particularly of late. He's got to stay positive. Take a hint from the great Nadal, Roger. Stay positive. For those of you just tuning in, I mentioned that in the Nadal versus Khachanov match, which was a very competitive match. But I mentioned that Nadal deserves a lot of credit for staying positive, staying committed. Never once did I feel that he was down or despondent or even upset about what was happening. And he was getting punished. Khachanov was punishing Rafa in many respects. The excitable bull was not firing on all cylinders in that particular match. He escaped. He slipped out from under the heavy weight of Khachanov's penetrating ground strokes and serves. But the delivery man was not quite in the house until the end. I forgot to mention that in the last set against Khachanov, Nadal finally did deliver on the 15-30 point on Khachanov's serve, which converted it into a double break point, and he converted the first one. He finally did that. But for the entirety of the match, he was not able to convert many of the 15-30 points on Khachanov's serve. Well, that raises concerns in a way. But again, it's nothing that indicates that there's something permanently wrong with Nadal's play. It's scrappy stuff, professional tennis at the top levels. What can I say? It's not pretty. Well, Federer had sort of a pretty match today, didn't he? He likes them pretty. He likes to play beautifully, and he likes to have his matches be quite aesthetically appealing. And tie breaks, dropping sets, 5 sets, those aren't very pretty. Those are rough and tumble. Those have to involve street fighters, brass knuckles, and jackknives. And both players emerge a bit worse for the wear at the end of those street fights. Well, Nadal had a bit of a street fight. There was a bit of street fighting in the Nishioka match, not really, but Federer is coming through clean, folks. But you know what? The ultimate street fighter, the elastic hyena, 13 times a Grand Slam champion, the defending champion at Wimbledon, and the slayer of Federer in Cincinnati, where Federer was apparently unbreakable and went 100 straight service games holding his serve before the hyena got a piece of Federer's serve. Well, Federer came out. He was not his usual tiger-like, he's not his usual sort of cat-like persona. He was more like a pussycat, as I've been saying, and that didn't put him in good stead with Djokovic. But there's a chance to redeem. There's a chance to redeem for Roger, and my scientific prediction of this is that he probably will not. Djokovic will probably push him out of the tournament. And that's a little double entendre there with push. We'll see what Djokovic does. Hopefully, Federer will require Novak to do more than push. A lot more than push. And that will be an indicator that we have a match on our hands. It could go 4, it could go 5, or it could be a straight set victory for either man. I picked Djokovic on the numbers, on the science, on the recent form, crunching the numbers. I think the smart money might be on Djokovic in that quarterfinal match with Federer, which looks to be on course to happening. Now, Djokovic is going to have to deal, it looks like, with Luca Pouille. But Sosa now serving for the third set in the match against Pouille. It could be Sosa. In either case, neither Pouille or Sosa is anything close to a formidable obstacle for Djokovic, unless Djokovic buckles for some reason. But we can expect there to be 4 sets because Djokovic usually needs to drop a set in order to muster the energy, in order to get those conditions of adversity that are so necessary for Djokovic to come out in sort of God mode. Well, maybe he won't be required to do so. We'll have to see. But I hope Federer pushes the elastic hyena to greater heights, requires him to play better tennis requires him to lift the level beyond mere pushing. And he can do it. Djokovic can construct points. Most of his game is dependent on essentially keeping the errors down and pushing to some degree. But heck, Roger was even pushing today. When Roger gets nervous, he pushes. That's all he was doing with Kyrgios in the first set today. It was a little disappointing, but I do think that Roger had some nerves, without question, and they were evident in the pre-match interview. Go check it out. I'm going to take a few comments. You're talking about my animal metaphors. Somebody is saying that it's not that funny. Well, the animal metaphors are kind of some running commentary, some running metaphors. It's not supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be descriptive, to be honest. I'm not trying to be funny with the animal metaphors at all. Now, sometimes I'll inject a little bit of humor, for example, and I'm kind of being sarcastic when I say that, while Federer is usually a prowling cat, an agile cheetah, he came out on the court in Cincinnati against Djokovic as a pussycat. So Federer is a feline animal on the court. He moves around like a cat without question, but unfortunately a bit of a pussycat. So I don't know if you think that's funny, but let me know. We're not trying to be funny here, folks. We're trying to call the shots. We're trying to describe these brilliant matches of tennis. And I say to you this, the match with Federer today against Nick Kyrgios, who is a very tricky customer with a booming serve and a massive array of weaponry from the ground. I say to you that it suggests that Federer is in ascendance at this U.S. Open. His chances against Djokovic after this match against Kyrgios look a little better. I think that he will probably still struggle to escape the clutch of the hyena, but I do think that Federer stands a chance, a fairly good chance. And we'll see what he looks like against Millman. I said before, for those of you just tuning in, that John Millman, who a lot of you may not have heard of, is posting some very impressive return numbers on break points and break point conversions. And so Roger has his work cut out for him, particularly with respect to protecting his serve. Millman is breakable without question. We can ask Mikhail Kukushkin about that. There were a number of breaks in that match. Talk about an ugly match. Talk about a street fight. A smorgasbord of unforced errors, but also some great tennis between Millman and Kukushkin. Well, Millman is able to trim the Kazakhstanian and moves on to the round of 16 to face the greatest tennis player of all time, Roger Federer. Well, if Federer can protect the serve, prevent Millman from converting the 15-30 points on Federer's serve into double break points like he was doing today against Kyrgios, if he can attack the seconds, I don't think the nerves are going to be a problem for Federer against John Millman. I was saying earlier, for those of you tuning in, Nick Kyrgios makes Roger Federer a little nervous. Goat or no goat, the goat is he is the goat, but just so happens the goat gets nervous sometimes. Well, Federer was not able to convert that nervous energy into brilliant tennis for the lion's share of the first set against Kyrgios, but ultimately he was able to steal that set like a bank robber away from Nick Kyrgios. And then, as we talked about, it was a trip to the Olive Garden in the second set. And in the final set, Federer was able to squeeze that one out 7-5. Roger Federer is moving through this tournament in straight sets, folks. He's not dropped one yet. Will John Millman take a set from Federer? If he does, it'll be good preparation for the street fight that awaits Federer in the quarterfinals. Federer and Djokovic are going to be bumping ugly. It's not going to be a pretty picture, I don't think. I think it could get very ugly. But you know what? Federer needs some ugliness in his tennis. That's been my point for the last couple of weeks. I've turned away from the idea that Federer, I haven't turned away from the idea that Federer is the most beautiful player that has ever been. But I've turned away from the idea that he needs to sort of be very concerned about his beauty. Not that he's overly concerned, but you do get the sense that appearance and beauty are a set of expectations that surround him that he feels like he needs to live up to. Well, I say to you, Roger, forget about it. Forget about those expectations of beauty. Get down and dirty, my friend. It's going to be a street fight with Djokovic, and I cannot wait to watch this match. If it's not a street fight, well, so be it. If Federer can move through the Serbinator in straight sets, more power to him. But I do think that a bit of a rough ride for Federer could prepare him for the threats that are awaiting. We'll see what happens. Heck, I wouldn't put it past Roger Federer to come through this entire tournament and lift the trophy without dropping a set. It could happen, but I am very glad, as a fan of Roger Federer, I am extremely glad that this Djokovic match is on the horizon, because just as Roger wants a piece of Djokovic, I kind of want a piece of Djokovic. I want to see a better match from Djokovic. I want Federer to require Djokovic to play better tennis. And that will require that Federer comes out as the prowling tiger, the feline killer, rather than a mere pussycat, which is what he was for Djokovic in Cincinnati. Pussycats don't require great tennis on the other side of the court, folks. Djokovic saw that Federer was a pussycat that day, and he pushed and went deep as a general strategy and won the match. More power to him. It was a smart move. It was all that was required to win that match. And there were a few flashes of brilliance from Djokovic, without question. But generally, that was the strategy. I want more from Djokovic. I want the hyena to come out ready to kill. He's going to be. But can Federer take a set from him at least? Well, God help Roger if he does, because the minute you take a set from Djokovic, he sometimes can exploit the adversity in ways that result in wins. And it's an ugly scene at the end of the match. It's a bloody scene. Djokovic is bloody, worse for the wear, but he comes out the winner. And that's why we love him. And I do love Novak Djokovic. And I do love Rafa Nadal. I was a little worried about him, in fact, the other night. He has the knee issue, and it was just not characteristic the other night with Khachanov. I still can't quite figure out whether it was something with Nadal or something about the pressure of Khachanov. But to the extent that it was the pressure of Khachanov, well, there again, I go back to my previous proposition for you Fed fans. If Federer can break through the Djokovic wall, if Federer can find the cracks in the Djokovic edifice and exploit them fully, and ruthlessly and land a place in the semifinals, I think he becomes the new favorite to lift his 6th trophy at the U.S. Open, not having won the tournament for 10 years. Now, that would be something. But I think Federer is capable of doing it. If he pushes through Djokovic, if he can plow through the Djokovician wall, then Federer will become the new favorite. Why? Well, who would he have to deal with in the semis? It's looking like it'll either be Cilic, possibly Goffin. Cilic is playing later. These are pending matches. It's unclear. Nishikori looks to be evening it up against the little engine that could, Diego Schwartzman. Zverev is on serve in the second against Philippe Kohlschreiber, having taken the first in a tiebreaker that was pretty decisively won by Sasha. Pouille looks to be about to close this thing out against Sosa. Pouille's taken the first 2 sets, and now they're into a tiebreaker in the third. But who will Federer face? Who will he have to deal with if he can get through the elastic hyena? Well, he will face probably either Cilic or Goffin. We'll have to see what happens in those matches. It also could be Nishikori. You could see Zverev. But none of those people are insurmountable obstacles for a Roger Federer in ascendance, ascending to the heavens. I hope, for the sake of Federer fans, that Roger does ascend to the heavens and lifts this trophy. It would be marvelous and beautiful and inspiring to watch him do that. Well, based on today's performance and based on the context of this tournament, he's improving. He's on an upward trajectory. Federer is in ascendance. And if he can push through that semifinal, there's a whole host of different characters at this point that might be facing him in the semifinal. We'll talk about it more as we know more. But none of these players poses an insurmountable obstacle to the Raj. None of them. No, sir. Now, in the final, however, it might just be Nadal. Now, it might not be Nadal. Nadal is my pick at this point based on the scientific analysis to win this tournament. I could be wrong about that. And there's no description or prediction that is totally airtight. I've described Nadal as the anti-consolidator or the anti-consolidationist, meaning he will not let players consolidate breaks. He gets broken, but he will not permit the player on the other side of the court to consolidate. Well, Khachanov contradicted that description of Nadal. Nadal fell off his game a little bit. But it will likely be Nadal. I think Nadal can get through to this final at the very least. So we could be looking at the final at the U.S. Open that has never yet happened. The final between Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal. It could happen. We don't know what's going to happen. My prediction is that it won't happen on the rational scientific evidence. But there's more to tennis than rationality and science. There's the unpredictable element. There's the element of hope. And there's just, the unpredictability of this game. So anything can happen, really. Anything can happen. Now, with players like Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer in the tournament, maybe anything can happen is a little too much to say. Maybe that doesn't quite fit the situation because these players are dependable and anything can't really happen against Federer, right? Particularly, I would say Nadal and Djokovic at this point in light of Federer's recent form at previous tournaments. But within the context of this tournament, Federer looks dependable. I like the way he looks. He's in ascendance. He's on an upward trajectory. And to be honest, I'd rather have him start weak or nervous as he did today and end strong as he did today, as opposed to what he did in the Nishioka match, which was start strong and end very shaky. But now, after the pair match, I think he finished pretty strong with pair, and he certainly finished strong against Kyrgios. He held his line masterfully today, folks. It was a sight to behold. Roger Federer slaying a real rival of his. Extremely young player. Remember, there's that dimension. The 37-year-old wipes the big serving Kyrgios, who's all of 21 years old, off the court. That's telling. This was a big match, and it was not all about the wrong things that Kyrgios did. Kyrgios stayed committed to this match. He really did. He never was absent from the court. He never went missing, which he does sometimes, or he never got real bratty. After losing the first set, he was scolding himself, but he didn't get too out of sorts. He minded his manners, basically. And he played fairly well, basically. But Federer was just too much, too consistent, way too consistent. Remember, only 3 unforced errors in that final set. The unforced errors came way down for Federer, which was very promising to watch. But listen, I'll say it again. If Federer can get through the hyena, he is my pick to win the tournament and lift his 6th at the U.S. Open after a decade of a slump, essentially. Now, it hasn't been that much of a slump. He's been going pretty deep at the U.S. Open, but he's not been turning this into a title win, this tournament into a title win at all for the last 10 years. It's been scarce at the U.S. Open for him. Well, I think he's capable of doing this. But that's the outside possibility. It could happen. Again, the science, the hard science, to the extent we can do hard science in tennis, the hard science suggests that the hyena will emerge triumphant against the GOAT. But Federer is ascending, folks, and Federer is capable of sending Djokovic packing from this tournament. But he needs to understand the Djokovic paradox. He needs to understand that Djokovic thrives on the adversity. And he must hold the line. He cannot let up. In the match with Nishioka, first round match, Federer let up at the end. He was on the cusp of escorting Nishioka to the bagel shop, and then, if nothing else, to the Olive Garden. Well, that didn't happen. Nishioka kept coming back at Federer, and Federer started committing errors and started to buckle just a little bit, and the level of his play sunk. He did squeeze out of the match. It was a straight set win. It was no big deal. But I said during the match that if there was a player of the caliber of a Djokovic on the other side of the court and Federer had slipped back a little bit, Federer had fallen off form, well, Djokovic would have exploited that like there was no tomorrow. He would have been all over that like flies on poop. And again, Djokovic is a street fighter. He doesn't mind losing a set or two. No, sir. It's different for Roger. Roger needs to win sets. Roger gets down. It's one thing for Roger to lose, say, the third set. But if he loses the first set in a match, it can get a little weird. I recall the match, for example, against Cilic at Indian Wells. He managed to squeeze out of that one, but it was a problematic match for him. He was not in a good mental state because he lost that first set. It hurts him. For Djokovic, it's the opposite. Djokovic thrives on the adversity, as all the commentators will say and note, or at least the smart commentators, John McEnroe among them, Djokovic will fight, and if he feels Federer slipping just a little bit, he will attack relentlessly. And he brings a much more sophisticated game than the one he brought to the pussycat Federer at Cincinnati. Djokovic does bring a very sophisticated game. He is arguably the greatest returner in tennis history, or at least since Andre Agassi. I sort of prefer Agassi. But Djokovic has the numbers, has the record, and he is eminently dependable in a way. The game rests for him on just a sliver of unforced errors. He doesn't make mistakes. The other players do, and they go down. He lures them in and then eats them up for lunch at the end of the day. Well, what will Federer have to do against Djokovic? Well, I'm going to probably save that for another time because we have to do first things first here, my friends. It's going to be Millman, and Millman is potentially a problem for Federer. We'll have to see. But if I am right, and Federer is in ascendance at this tournament, on an upward trajectory, then Millman could very well just be putty in his hands. But if Millman can take a set from Federer, maybe this would be a good test. Again, as I said before, for those of you joining us, Millman has been posting some tremendous numbers in terms of aggregate numbers in the tournament, numbers that suggest something about Millman's form in general in the tournament. Remember, Millman has won more break points than anybody in the tournament right now. 25 break points, and he's done with his third round match. And remember, he's very solid on break points converted as well, but he's also solid on the second serve win percentage. So he brings an all-around game. His serve is not going to be as impenetrable as a Nick Kyrgios' serve. He's going to be breakable, and if Roger is playing some clutch tennis, as I expect he will convert the 15-30 opportunities on Millman's serve to double break points. For those of you watching, watch closely at the 15-30 points on Millman's serve. What does Roger do with those points? That's going to be a major indicator of whether his return game is up to snuff. But he can get through Millman without winning any of those 15-30 points, to be honest. We'll just have to see. So, again, they've only met once. There's not much of a history here. Millman brings some good numbers, aggregate numbers from the tournament. He came out of a street fight with the Kazakhstanian Mikhail Kukushkin, who was hitting unforced errors just all over the place today, but also hitting some very devastating winners. Well, it will be an interesting match between Federer and Millman. And I'm going to have a lot more to say on Federer versus Djokovic, if, in fact, that happens. Djokovic's next match will be against Gasquet, and that will happen later tonight. Djokovic leads very strongly, very decisively in the head-to-head. Gasquet shouldn't be much of a problem. Last time Gasquet beat Djokovic was, I think, in 2000. And they've played a fairly substantial number of times. I can't remember the specific amount. And then in the fourth round, it looks like Djokovic will have to see what happens to Pouille. Sosa just took the third set, but it looks like Djokovic will have a little Pouille problem in the round of 16, but nothing insurmountable for the hyena. No question about that. He'll come through, and we're looking like this quarterfinal will happen. So I'll have a lot more to say about that the next time. And that's about all I have to say for today. Let's take a couple of comments before I sign off. I've been seeing a few of these comments. It looks like there's a great conversation happening. Thanks so much for your support. Actual Cheese says that he's pretty sure Fed will take Millman to the bagel shop at least once. Well, he almost took the mighty Kyrgios to the bagel shop. That was about to happen. But no need to do so. It was the Olive Garden, which is really just as impressive. Boris is mentioning that Millman will be the real test. I think Millman will be a test. To the extent you're meaning to suggest, Boris, that Kyrgios wasn't a test, I disagree. We can talk about some of those numbers with Kyrgios. I'll have to look a little closer at the Kyrgios numbers, but just from a holistic observation and an sort of experience of the match, I don't think Kyrgios fell off the wagon here too substantially at all. I feel like he played a solid match and that Federer was just too much. Again, Federer, when he gets the confidence going, when he gets the first set and then the second set under his belt, the momentum builds. That's what he needs. He needs momentum. Djokovic needs adversity. Federer needs momentum, upward momentum. That's how he wins. And as I said before, I would much rather he starts nervous and a little weak and finds his legs and finishes strong rather than starting strong as he did with Nishioka, and ending a little bit shaky and weak. So that's another factor that we should be looking at tomorrow, or it'll be Monday against Millman. Millman will be a test, Boris. I think you've been listening, but to remind you, Millman is posting some very impressive numbers, aggregate numbers in the tournament. So Millman is no slouch. Roger Federer needs to take him very seriously. But I can tell you this, John Millman is not going to make Roger Federer as nervous as Nick Kyrgios makes Roger Federer. So Federer was able to convert the nerves into a very solid win today. It was a pleasure to watch, and it was a pleasure to discuss this with you guys. Again, we've got a number of matches pending. I will be back tomorrow for another live stream. For those of you just joining, remember to subscribe to the channel. And remember to hit the bell icon next to the subscribe button so you can get notifications of these Tennis Talk Daily live streams, which are coming at you every day during the U.S. Open, the final Grand Slam of the year. We're looking at this thing from every possible analytical angle, folks. And if there's something I'm missing, well, let me know. I want your comments. And you can leave comments in response to the video, because this video will go up as a watchable video for folks later. You can leave your comments there. I will read them. Sometimes I won't respond, but I will read every comment. I read every comment because I monitor these boards. And if there's any thugs that enter into these boards and start talking trash, well, I try to, again, monitor it and control it to some degree. That's important to me because I want a sane and civil channel where all of us can come together around our deep love of this game, a love that transcends Federer, that transcends Djokovic, and that transcends Nadal. Certainly transcends Tsitsipas, who was sent home to his mama by Medvedev. But ultimately, Medvedev is out, ousted by Borna Coric, who is posting also some very good aggregate numbers. Coric will be a problem for Delpo, who also prevailed very impressively. I watched that match against Verdasco last night. So it'll be Delpo against Coric. I would pick Delpo because he looks committed. And Delpo could be a little problem for Rafa, particularly if Rafa doesn't pick up his game, to be honest. He pushed through Khachanov, but I'm not sure the Nadal that was on the court against Khachanov could prevail over Del Potro in terms of the recent form that Delpo has been exhibiting. That forehand from Delpo is just often unreturnable, no matter where it goes, because it's just so fast, so much power behind that thing, and penetration. Verdasco was just suffocating under the pressure of the Delpo forehands, folks. So we'll see. Delpo could surprise us all and send the Spaniard, Nadal, the world number one, packing in the semifinal. Well, won't that be something? It could happen. I'm not counting on it happening. I think Nadal had a minor blip against Khachanov. He could not convert the 15-30 points on the Khachanov serve into double break points. That is the key to the match, in my opinion. And I've looked at this thing from a number of different angles, tried to understand it. I certainly watched every minute of it. We'll see what happens in the top half of the draw. We have some interesting matches coming up there. It'll be Nadal versus Basilashvili. It'll be Thiem versus Anderson. It'll be Delpo versus Cilic. And it'll be the two massive, arguably serve bots, Isner versus Raonic. Well, in a way, I'm glad one of those two is going to go home because they're basically the same player in a way. But we know who Johnny Mac prefers. We know who Johnny Mac prefers. He's got a little bromance with John Isner, doesn't he, folks? Boris says Delpo can be a problem for anybody, and I totally agree. Listen, I'm going to have to close this thing out now. I've really appreciated your participation. Looking very much forward to tomorrow's live stream so we can continue this. It's going to be fantastic. I'm excited. I'm inspired. And I'm so excited to share all of this with you. So thanks again. Signing off from Boston. Bye-bye.